I think I know how far I can't shoot with this crossbow. My zone of confidence. I'm going to pick up where I left off in our last video. In that video, I was carrying Bunjie, talking about the fact that I think with this old, slow crossbow, really 20 yards is about the farthest you can shoot and not expect the animal that you're shooting at to move, to change the target, right? So that the point of impact lines up with my point of aim. You'll see that I've got this fancy new scope here, the Burris Oracle X on this crossbow. It actually benefits this crossbow in picking exact yardages. I'm going to do a video about that. I've got it just about done, so make sure you subscribe for that video. But 20 yards with this crossbow, that's quite a ways, right? Especially now that I've dumbed it down with these heavier arrows, 563 total grain arrow weight, slows this crossbow down quite a bit. 20 yards, about the farthest you want to shoot with this kind of crossbow. Past 20 yards, all of a sudden the deer duck the string, right? I've learned through trial and experience, through videos that we did with Darren Cummings here on Death by Bunjie. Go watch those videos. But in my doe hunt in Maryland, where I killed a doe with this crossbow, shooting 260 feet per second or so, 20 yards, they don't duck the string. 27 yards, they do. But the jury is still out on a fancier, newer crossbow like this one, Bunjie 3.0, the Scorpyd Deathstalker 420, with the arrows I'm shooting, 442 grains or so total arrow weight, including the broadhead. We're shooting close to 400 feet per second with this crossbow. I consider that a modern speed for a crossbow. I think when you get over 450 feet per second, you're really shooting an ultra modern speed. But when you're shooting a modern speed, like somewhere around 400 feet per second or so with a 400 grain arrow, you got plenty of momentum at those longer distances to kill deer. We're well over 0.7 slugs of momentum out of the gate with this crossbow. Energy's not the problem, right? It's hitting the target. It's making sure that your point of aim hits your point of impact. Now, I talked a little bit about this in my last video, and I've kind of given a lot of thought to this. It is my zone of confidence. That's a term that I just made up, and I talked to Genevieve about it. She approves. What is the zone of confidence, you ask? Well, that is the distance at which I can be pretty confident with my crossbow that when I pull the trigger, my point of aim and the point of impact will be the same. That the deer can't move because I haven't shot so far as to give that deer enough time to move. But that zone of confidence with Bunjie really is 20 yards. I can be pretty confident that with this old slow crossbow at 20 yards, the deer's not going to duck the string all that much. The arrow's going to hit where I was aiming. I really like that, right? Now, this crossbow's a lot faster. I've shot out to 30 yards without a deer showing any evidence whatsoever of an ability to duck the string, to change the point of impact. Last year, I shot a doe in the ridge staging food plot with this crossbow at 30 yards. No problem whatsoever hitting exactly where I was aiming. The video that I did with Darren Cummings, we talked about this concept, deer ducking the string. Basically, the rule of thumb that he talked about in that video was take the speed of your crossbow, divide it by 10, and if you're aiming at the heart, you'll still hit the vitals if the deer ducks the string. 400 feet per second or so with this crossbow at 40 yards, if I aim at the heart, should be able to hit the lungs even if the deer ducks the string. Now, that only applies, though, with a broadside shot, doesn't it, right? I've been hunting with Bunjie 3.0 here an awful lot. We've been out on the state gamelands here together most recently and trying to pattern some deer and figure out where we could get a shot at a deer. We've had some really good success. We've sat on the ground and I was able to find out where the deer were moving, saw a really nice buck cross my shooting lane at 85 yards and 85 miles per hour, so that was a no-go. But I really got a feel for where the deer were crossing. Tons and tons of deer crossing this one area on this road on state gamelands. Sitting on the ground, I did have a button buck at 85 yards that he saw me moving and stuff, didn't show much concern about it, went about his business, and I thought, man, you know, this hunting from the ground thing, I might have an opportunity at a deer if I can get a little bit closer. So the next night, I just set up with the slick black Cadillac here on the other side of that trail where those deer were coming out of that thick clear cut. I set up down there on the ground, all set up with a tripod. I had the Caldwell Deadshot Field Pod set up in front of me, kind of serving as a little bit of a blind almost, right? I had some camouflage netting hanging off of it, all that good stuff to make it look like I was just a bush sitting there. I figured that I'd be 40 yards to 60 yards from those deer when they came out of that thick clear cut. My plan both worked and didn't work at the same time. It worked because the deer came out right around when I expected them to. It didn't work because the minute that lead doe came out, she's looking right at me. She picked me off immediately. I gotta tell you, I'm really happy I had this scope on the crossbow when she came out of there. I would have guessed she was like at 60 yards. That's what I was kind of thinking. 40 to 60 yards was where those trails were. When I ranged her over and over, she was at 45, 44, and then 42 yards. That's putting the crosshairs right on her head, right on her chest. With this scope, I know the exact yardage for this deer, and it gives me a reticle exactly where that shot wants to take place. It gives me a little red dot where I need to make my point of aim. I put that red dot right at the top of the heart, bottom of the lungs, my preferred shot. I really like the top of the heart, bottom of the lungs, because that's where the biggest arteries are. That's where you're going to get something good there with that shot, right? I'm actually aiming inside the front shoulder. I'm not aiming behind it. Back in the day, with the original Bunjie, I would not take that shot. That head-on shot, I have taken it one time with perfect, beautiful success, and a second time without such good success. In fact, never found that second deer. And because of that, I swore to myself I would never take that shot again. Bunjie just simply did not have enough energy with the arrows shooting 305 feet per second, just not enough energy to get that job done. Here, with an even heavier arrow shooting 442 grain, total grain weight, shooting around 400 feet per second or so, you're well over the 0.7 slugs of momentum, and that is more than enough momentum, more than enough energy with that hacker broadhead to kill that deer with a proper shot. So I felt comfortable taking that shot with this equipment. You got to know your equipment, right? I want to be clear that nothing in this video is me telling you how far you should shoot or how far you shouldn't shoot. That's for you to decide. That's between you and your equipment, really, but also between you and the hunting situation that you are in. This video, just like the last one I did, is just food for thought. I ranged this deer at 42 yards as she's coming to me. And it's quite clear by her behavior that she spotted me immediately and that she is not going to come any closer. This is outside my zone of confidence with Bunjie. But with Bunjie III, I really don't have a maximum in my zone of confidence yet. I know that 30 yards is okay. I know 30 yards is totally within my zone of confidence. But can I stretch that out a little bit further? That's the question. I have looked at this over and over, and I am convinced I did not hit that deer in any mortal way. May have scratched her back or something like that, probably knocked the snow off her back. But if you look at the flight of this arrow, it actually doesn't change its trajectory at all. The only thing that changes the trajectory of that arrow is when it hits the brush behind the deer. The snow was coming down pretty good, and the snow had accumulated on the crossbow. So at first I thought, man, I missed. I made a bad shot because there was snow on a crossbow. Turns out the snow, the weather, did not affect my shot at all. It can, trust me. And I got another video coming about shooting in bad weather, because we're getting into that time of year when the weather's going to get pretty bad, right? My shot in this particular instance was not affected by the weather, right? We can see, if I put that dot on there, I'll show you where I was aiming, and you can see that that arrow, actually when I slow it down, that arrow was right on target with the dot. The nice thing about those cameras I got hanging next to me, I got this camera hanging in a tree, so it's not really moving like the crossbow's moving all over the place, like a person holding a camera might be moving all over the place. This camera's just sitting stationary off to the side. So yeah, it's a little far away, but we can zoom in a little bit with the 4K and get a good look at this, and you can see how much that deer ducks. She starts to duck, not at 20 yards, not at 30 yards, but as the arrow gets about 10 yards away from her. It passes that 30-yard line. Then she starts to duck, and between 32, 34 yards to 42 yards, she ducks a lot. can't pull themselves down. They're not holding onto the ground. She can only use gravity to pull herself down, but she does it fast. My zone of confidence is eroded a little bit now, knowing that 42 yards is too far for this deer. 32, 34 is a much more reasonable distance with that crossbow. That is a distance at which, based on this video, I can probably get that arrow there before that deer moves in any considerable amount. I go back to the car, I look at the video to verify all that. I have this little doodad from Genevieve. It was a Christmas present. You need to get one of these if you don't have one already. Plug your Tacticam SD card or any other SD card right into this. Fits the micros, fits the big ones, the regular ones. Plug it in here, plug it into the phone, look at the videos. So I'm going to look at those now. I don't really want to, but we're going to find out. Look at all that snow, man. By the time I get back out there half an hour later, there's actually 3 inches of snow and I can't see anything. So I'm waiting for the snow to melt to actually go find the arrow. As of the shooting of this video, I haven't found the arrow yet. Another observation I want to point out, her head is up. A few of you pointed this out in my Maryland doe video, that with the deer with the head down, they can use that head down as leverage, right? When they hear the crossbow go off, they lift the head up, and that sort of works as a fulcrum, lowering the deer's body to help them duck the string a little bit faster. Her head is up. She's alert. There's no question about that. But she doesn't have that ability. Despite that, she can drop fast. Another thing I want to point out is the shot is good. Look at this shot, my point of aim. If we adjust for that and leave the point of aim on the screen, that arrow's going exactly where I was aiming. The point of aim and the point of impact don't match up because my target moved, right? And that's the difference between backyard shooting and actually hunting. Just because in a 60-yard backyard I'm able to make a perfect shot, hit a dime at 60 yards or what have you, doesn't really mean everything when you get out in the woods. The targets move. There's all these other factors with wind and snow and alert deer, all that sort of thing. Speaking of alert deer, I know what you're going to say. Rich, you should have aimed for the heart. You should have aimed low. You should always aim for the heart. Well, I don't always want to hit the heart. To aim at the heart always, because you think that the deer is going to duck the string, even at 20 yards, would I aim at the heart with this crossbow at 20? Of course not, right? It's going to be different depending on yardage. I am not a big fan of that. I've never made a career of doing that, so to speak. My crossbow hunting career has really avoided that. I've always tried to get my arrow to go where I want it to go before the deer can change that point of impact. To me, aiming low because you think the deer is going to duck, that's guessing. Guessing really isn't a part of the Death by Bunjie crossbow method. If you wonder about the Death by Bunjie crossbow method, you should read my book, The Death by Bunjie Crossbow Method. Ooh. But in all seriousness, I get the idea that if you aim at the heart, the deer ducks. Obviously, you got a better chance of hitting vitals, all that good stuff. Let's adjust on this video and see how that would have worked out, shall we? We adjust for the heart. Let's drop our point of aim down. And then when I shoot and adjust for that, we'll leave the point of aim on the screen. You can see that if I had hit that spot, what would have happened? A glancing shoulder blade shot, inadequate penetration perhaps, maybe a spine shot, maybe just a glancing spine shot. I get that this isn't a broadside shot either, and it's a fair statement to say this is not an ideal shot to take. I am still confident that with this crossbow, shooting at around 400 feet per second, 400 grain arrow, blah, blah, blah. With that much momentum, I really do think that a modern crossbow has enough energy, even at 40 yards, to penetrate the sternum, hit the heart, give me enough penetration of that arrow to where it goes all the way through, probably even reaches the liver on a deer like that, but at least gets both lungs. Can we extend our maximum effective range a little bit beyond that 30 yards? What do we do with these deer that are at 40 yards? We really have three options, don't we? There's three things that we can do. The first is don't take the shot. And this is probably the smartest thing to do. Not always the easiest thing to do, but it's probably the smartest thing to do. Wait for that deer to enter your zone of confidence where you know with your crossbow with reasonable certainty that when you pull the trigger, the deer can't duck the string, that the arrow will get there before the deer can move. That's pretty cool. Those are high percentage shots. That gives you the most likelihood that you're going to be taking a deer home. If you don't want to do that, a second option is to aim low. Aim for the heart and expect that the deer, if it drops at those farther yardages, I wouldn't do that at 20 yards with this crossbow. I would do it at 25 yards with Bunjie, at 35 yards with Bunjie 3.0, right? But that's going to vary from one arrow setup and one crossbow to another. Taking those shots as you extend your range out, aiming at the heart probably is the best way to counter that if you're going to take those shots. That's probably the best advice I could give somebody based on this video, based on these experiences. The third option, which I do not like at all, is to do what I've heard in podcasts from people who I actually respect. I really like them, telling their audience in these podcasts that they'll aim 8 inches below the deer knowing that the deer is going to duck. The problem with that is you don't know. You're guessing. Aim where there's no deer in hopes that there would be a deer there when the arrow gets there. One of the comments in my last video, and I get this, I do, was that it's kind of like a quarterback throwing to a receiver, right? You have to anticipate where the receiver is going to be when you throw the ball so that the receiver can catch it. The football analogies kind of are lost on me. I mean, I can't even name a current modern football player now that Tom Brady retired. I don't know anything. I get the football analogy even though I don't follow football. The problem with that is, for me, and the difference with that in this scenario for me, is the fact that in a football scenario, the quarterback and the receiver have practiced together hundreds of times. They've thrown the ball to each other. The quarterback knows, because he's on the same team as that receiver, he knows where that receiver will be and how far he has to throw the ball, how fast that receiver can run, how long that receiver's arms are, how far he can reach out and catch the ball, that sort of thing. And he probably can tell one receiver from another, and he probably can tell if that receiver if the play is going to the right, I know how far I've got to lead them versus the left. It might be a little bit different because they're on the same team and they have a plan as to what's going to happen. That's not what happens in the woods. That's not what happens with deer. Deer, they're not on our team. That's the difference. Deer are doing everything they can to not catch that arrow. That's the difference. The receiver wants to catch the arrow. The deer do not, right? They don't want anything to do with us. This deer, she wanted nothing to do with us. Me and Bunjie III. You can't know what the deer is going to do when you pull the trigger because the deer doesn't even know what the deer is going to do when you pull the trigger. Look back at the last video I did, 35 yards with Bunjie, the old, slow, 305 feet per second crossbow. That doe that I shot at 35 yards with that crossbow didn't duck at all. She was alert. She heard the safety click off and lifted her head when I clicked the safety off. That's one of the reasons I stopped doing the safety thing. I ease the safety up now because of that hunt, because of this deer. She's looking right at me, but she still does not duck the string a bit at 35 yards. You can't predict what a deer is going to do. This isn't football, and you're not on the same team. Aiming low, aiming at the heart, this is guessing. Right? It's beyond our zone of confidence. It's beyond the realm of high percentage shots. We're getting into something where it's a little bit of risk. And if you're willing to take that risk, I'm just trying to tell you how you'd have to think about it, right? I now know that 40 yards is beyond the zone of confidence for me. I can tell you that I will not take a shot aiming where there is no deer in hopes the deer moves into where the arrow is going to be when it gets there. That is just not something I'm going to do. That's another thing that I wrote about in this book. Hoping is not a hunting strategy. Really what we want, I think, is high percentage shots. That minimizes the potential for disappointment later, right? Keep those shots within your zone of confidence where the deer can't change that point of impact, right? And it's going to vary. You got to think about this stuff. I hope you got something out of these couple of videos, and I hope I don't have like a third video where I'm shooting at a deer and missing it or something like that. Hopefully we'll have an actual deer that I can show you. I was so proud of this too because it was like my first shot I ever took on state game lands. How cool is that? So we're always evolving. Our crossbow hunting method is always evolving, especially here on Death by Bunjie. So hopefully you're getting something out of that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, all hail Bunjie.